What's up, guys? This is Rick with the Space City X Files. I'm glad you decided to join us again. Uh, this week's episode is kind of a continuation of last week's episode. I mean, it's not the same topic, but if you were listening to last week's episode at the end, when we were going over theories, we briefly went over a little story about Mel's Hole. And just a little portion that we went over was pretty interesting, so I thought it would be good to go ahead and do a whole episode over it. Anyways, I promised you to do the full story, and so here it is. If you weren't with us last week, don't turn us off. I promise you. The name of the story, that's just the name of the story. All right, it doesn't have anything of a sexual nature or anything like that. We're not doing a whole perverted episode about some dude's personal space. All right, I promise you. For those that don't know, let me do a quick recap. So Mel Waters calls into a radio show and tells an amazing story about a mysterious hole in the ground on his land. According to Mel, the hole is about 80,000 feet deep, and there was one account of it bringing an animal back to life. He also claims that the hole never fills up. And he supposedly knows this because the previous owners, the adjoining neighbors, including himself, have been dumping trash in it for over 20 years. Shortly after going public, Mel's life is just flipped upside down. Okay, so he's brutally assaulted. He ends up losing his land and business. Is this all a coincidence? Well, I don't know. Let's dig into the details of Mel's Hole and find out. All right. So before we do, give me 2 minutes to get through my spiel, and I'll be really quick, I promise. Space City X Files appreciates you, as always, listening today and for your continued support. If you're a new listener or would like to become a supporter, there are 3 main ways to do that, and I'll give you the details on that now. One, from our website, you can click on the Patreon tab, and there you can sign up for a $5 or $10 a month subscription. And with that, you're going to get unreleased content, unreleased full episodes, access to our Discord group, and free merch that will just drop on you at random times. The second way, if you're not quite ready to become a member, that's okay. But from our website, we also have the Support Us with the Tip tab. There you can make one-time donations for whatever you feel like typing in. 50 cents, $1, $5. It's all appreciated the same. And because we're dedicated to elevating the quality of our program, all our proceeds go back directly into the show. The third way and most effective way to support the show is to leave a review wherever you listen to us. And I can't state this enough because your feedback helps us to get better at what we do. And it also brings in more listeners, which is priceless. The last plug, we also have a show store that's open now. And there you can purchase hoodies, tees, stickers, and that supports our growth as well. All right, that'll do the announcements. Okay, so the story begins with Mel Waters sending a fax in to an AM channel radio host named Art Bell. Now, Art's radio station is called AM Coast to Coast, and his show pretty much is like a podcast about UFOs, UAPs, and other strange phenomena. So he was a podcaster before podcasting was cool. I mean, if it even is cool. But he was like an OG of podcasting. And so Mel sends this fax, this first fax to Art in early February 1997. And in this first fax, Mel introduces himself and lets Art know that he is writing to possibly get some kind of professional help from Art himself or maybe his many listeners. So Mel states that he owns a property out in eastern Washington near a place called Manassas Ridge. Now later he confirms the actual city he's staying in, which is just a little town right next to it called Ellensburg, Washington. And he includes that on this property he's owned for about 3 years at the time. He includes that there was a round hole about 9.5 feet in diameter, and he says that it's been there as long as anyone around the area can remember. So now Mel states that the previous owners, his neighbors and himself, have been dumping trash into the hole, and he started to realize one day that it's not filling up. Now, it's important to note that the kind of trash that they dumped down there was like not your typical household trash, all right? So this wasn't lawn clippings or leaves or kitchen trash bags. I mean, Mel states that they're dumping big things down there, like large furniture, building debris, and even whole dead cows. Mel has been dumping there for a while, but one day when he drops off some trash, he starts to really notice something that probably should have been pretty obvious. I mean, the hole's not filling up. Now, once he becomes aware of that, he starts to notice other strange things, like the hole had no echo. Like you can lean over the edge and holler as loud as you could, and there would be no sound at all. And so to test this theory out, he starts doing a couple of things, throwing some stuff down there, but he takes a large refrigerator, he leans it over the edge and shoves it in. And now you would think, like, surely it would have to be banging into the edges, or tumbling or even crashing loudly as it hit the bottom of something, whether it be water or ground or whatever. But it didn't. It made no sound at all. And it really made no sense at all to Mel. So he's super curious now, and he decides, well, I need to make a plan to try to find out how deep this thing really is. And he states in his facts to Art that his plan is to lower monofilament fishing line with the 1 pound triangle weight down the hole. So he rigs up a string, and he even says that he puts like some candy lifesavers down at the end, like around where the weight is. So if he hits water at some point, the candy will melt, and he'll know what's down there at least. At least he'll know that it's water. And so he starts his experiments, and he sends down about 3 reels full worth of monofilament string, and the hole still keeps going. Now, quick sidebar, if you're wondering why Mel chose to go straight to fishing line, it's because he was actually a professional shark fisherman at one point in California. So I guess he was just better familiar with the string and the equipment. And whatever the case was, for 1997, it was a pretty good idea. And I know we got better stuff now that we could have used to find out, what's down there. But this was a good idea that he had. So he's 3 reels in and no bottom, and he quickly finds himself buying more and more fishing line. He states in his facts that to Art that he's buying fishing line in bulk to save money. And when he decides he's paid enough out of pocket for fishing line, which is not cheap, he's already at the equivalent of about 80,000 feet deep. And who knows how much further it would have gone. But it's worth noting that the candy on the end of the fishing line, it never dissolved. And so Mel wraps up the facts by telling Art that he's out of explanations, and that he hopes his wife, who happens to be a geologist, can soon get some of her professional colleagues to come do an assessment and help him out. And he ends the memo stating one last strange fact about the hole. He says that animals will not go near the thing. Dogs, cats, squirrels, they steer completely clear of the thing, and birds will not even land by it. And that's how he concludes his first memo. Now, the second facts gets resent along with the first facts. I'm guessing either he didn't get a reply to the first one, or it just didn't go through, but Mel mentions that the first fact is included with the second one. And in this second fax, he states that there have been some updates to his situation. So from the tone of the letter, you can tell that, he's kind of frantic. He's experiencing something that, he just definitely doesn't know how to deal with. And so he states that after driving into Yakima County, which is south of where he is, on the way back home, he decides, okay, I'm going to stop at the property. Another sidebar here. He never states the address of the property. He only kind of gives vague locations in his letters, which allows for for you to know the general area of where the hole could be. It's thought, though, that he does give the exact location to Art Bell at some point, because he's eventually able to get a film crew there, and to kind of confirm if, military people are in the presence or something's going on. And when they arrived there, they did find signs of a military presence at the site. Okay, so they confirmed this by seeing tracks. I think they even left behind some blueprints, and some other items were left behind. And so, based off the evidence, based off the evidence of the clues that he gave to where the location of the property was, it would be somewhere to the left of Highway 82, likely between Elk Ridge Pass and Manistash Pass. All right, continuing on. So Mel, he stops at the property. He wants to check it out, see what's going on there. And he arrives at this access road. And this is the only way to get to the hole. Okay, so the main road leading through his property, it will have this like little secondary road that branches off, and that's how you would, get there to the hole. So when Mel comes to this access road, he states, and this is in the second facts, that the road is blocked off by armed military personnel. So Mel pulls up and he asks them what's going on. He'd like to know why they're on his land, and then to which someone that's there, armed but not in military fatigues, states to him that technically the property doesn't belong to him, and that there was a plane crash, and Mel would not be allowed passage back there until it's been properly investigated. And so I don't know what the guy meant about it not technically being his property. Like, what does he even mean by that? Was that a hint that they could take it away from him? I don't know. And so Mel mentions that he's seen the tracks of large construction equipment that have been passing back and forth already through there. Now, Mel refers to it as yellow gear in his facts. And after doing the research, it turns out that yellow construction gear is like big earth movers, excavators, forklifts that operate to move terrain and work under harsh conditions. So that's what he's already seeing. And I don't know how long they've been there, but, apparently based off the tracks, they've been moving back and forth quite a bit in and out of there. And so it seems like, to him, he states that it seems like a bit much for just a small, airplane crash. And so Mel, he doesn't leave. He hangs around there and he keeps asking questions. And of course, it's about the crash. Mel tells them, or that person, whoever it is, the one that's dressed in civilian clothes, but while he's armed, that he doesn't see any smoke. Mel says he doesn't see any smoke and that he hasn't heard anything on the news. And when he tells him that, he can tell that the person is like noticeably upset. He's got he doesn't have a lot of patience, kind of short fuse guy. And I'm not exactly sure how this comes into the conversation, but Mel states in his facts that the guy tells him that, hey, a drug lab can easily be found on your property. And now, this is another sidebar. So after reading the whole story, and I'm telling you this now because it's, so you don't have to worry about it all story long, but I'm guessing he says this because Mel does have a lab on his property, to which Mel divulges later to Art. But Mel claims that he's not growing, or Mel claims that he is growing a particular type of plant that the local natives use to develop a medicine. He swears it's non-narcotic, it's not marijuana or anything like that. But this is likely what the government guy meant, because he must have obviously noticed, Mel's little shop over there that he's working out of. And that's what he probably meant. I can easily find a drug lab on your property, meaning I know you have a lab. You may not be doing nothing wrong, but we can make it look like you're doing something wrong. So Mel states that anyways. Mel states he clearly receives what the guy is saying. So he just tells the guy, look, all right, I'm leaving. And he asked the man well, do you at least want my contact information so you know how to get a hold of me when it's all clear? And the man tells him, we know how to get a hold of you, okay? And so Mel's like, all right, well, shit, you know how to get a hold of me. I guess I'm leaving. And Mel tells him, well, I suppose you don't want me to mention this to anybody. And the man replies, no one would believe you anyways. Isn't that creepy as hell? So anyways, so Mel ends the second fax by saying the day that he sent both facts, he talked to his neighbors about the situation. And his neighbor said that the night before he'd seen something strange out at the hole. So his neighbor claims that, the other night, whenever he was driving, I guess he was dumping trash. So the other night he was driving back to the hole to make another drop. And he seen a, quote, blacker than black beam that stood out significantly from the night sky, emitting from where the uncovered hole was straight up into the clouds. And he doesn't elaborate much on it in this fax, but it's important for me to mention now that Mel states that others also encountered the same beam, but on separate occasions. So this is something that they all eventually see coming from the hole. All right, but anyways, that concludes the second fax. The next time Mel and Art correspond would be on February the 21st, 1997. And this time it's by telephone. All right, so Art's having Mel call into his show. And so this is the first time Art actually has Mel on the show. So they recap over the things that Mel talked about in the faxes. And after recapping the details of the case up until, the point of the day before, Art starts taking callers. And he starts taking them to see if any of the listeners can help Mel come up with any good idea or possible explanation. Now, some of the listeners, I think, were more like trying to get a feel of who Mel was, or trying to get a sense if he was lying. They were asking some pretty tough questions and in quick succession, but Mel holds his own in the situation. And if you listen to the recordings, you can hear that Mel's answers and questions are pretty genuine. And I'll put a link in the show notes too, so you can, for time purposes, we can't put every single one of the calls on there because I think they're 3 hours each, but I'll put a link so you can go listen to them. And I definitely recommend you do, just so you can get a sense of how Mel is, because he's really, really laid back, really clear spoken. He doesn't fumble with his words, and when he's talking about something, you can just see that, or sense that he's talking from memory, in my opinion. So one of the main points brought up from a caller was about his idea for measuring the depth of the hole. So a caller calls in and he asks about, what type of fishing line are you using and what type of weight, and Mel lets him know that it's a 20-pound test monofilament line with the 1-pound triangle weight. So the caller's point is, and the caller continues and says that, if the line is really that deep and you have a 1-pound weight on the end, so that weight plus the line of itself may be too much for the line, and it could have snapped already. And so this would mean basically that the string was just kind of spooling on top of itself, and it wasn't, and then that would mean that it wasn't as deep as Mel thought it was. The line was just kind of flopping down there. And so Art agrees that this could be a possibility, but Mel quickly explains that no, the line is taut, it's not loose, or he knows what it looks like when the line snaps. And he also mentions that when he brings it up and releases it, takes the drag off the reel, that it travels back down on its own. So this would indicate that the line was still attached to the weight. Anyways, it gives Mel a good idea that the caller brought up. So what Mel does, he's like, well, look, I'm going to go and I'm going to take one of these fishing reels and and I'm gonna weigh it. I'm gonna weigh it minus the plastic drum that's wrapped around it. And he does this because once he knows what the number is, the weight is, he multiplies it times the number of drums he's used, which at that point was about 18 drums. And so later he finds that out, and he comes back to Art and he confirms that the weight was currently at like approximately 17 pounds. So he doesn't have much more room to work with anyways, without popping the line, because it's only a 20-pound test. So he receives a few other wacky calls, and mostly people just guessing about what's down there, or what it could be. Art also takes a few calls from some brave souls willing to be lowered down into the abyss in the name of science, but they decline those offers. Someone even suggests throwing a cat down the hole, and he says if Mel listens for the cat's meow on the way down, whenever the meow stop, that'll be his way of determining how deep it is. And Art quickly shoots down that idea, knowing that if he didn't, the cat people would be coming for his head. So he quickly shuts that one down. And so that wraps that one up. That wraps that call up. And so 3 days later, on February 24th, 1997, Art has Mel on again, and they start off with another recap of the case files just to catch everyone up, because not everybody from last time is listening this time. And but Mel has a couple of other updates since then, and so he was intrigued with all the ideas he received from the last show, and it really got him thinking, like, man, I want to go and try some experiments. So Mel decides, I'm gonna go down there. He goes to the property, just to see if they concluded whatever it was they were doing. I mean, because according to them, it was just a plane crash. I mean, how long does that take to clean up or investigate? They should have drugged that thing off the first night. And so he goes down there to check it out. I mean, even if it just looked like they may be getting ready to leave, I'm sure that would have, put him at ease. But no luck. I mean, Mel goes over there and sees something, and so he tells Art on the show that no, they haven't left. What they have was they moved the enclosed perimeter even further out from the access road. So now they moved that perimeter out to the main road, his main road on his property. And so Mel, he can't even get in view of the access road anymore leading up to the area. He also stated that now there were helicopters flying around overhead on the regular. And so he asked, like, what kind of aircraft was this that supposedly crashed? And so Art takes a couple of calls, and someone brings up the fact that the hole could be some kind of portal for time travel. And he's like, yeah, I mean, I guess that would definitely be an interest to the U.S. government, and that would explain why the damn thing never filled up. And so when I first heard of this case, what made it so interesting to me was that I had just finished watching the show The Outer Range with Josh Brolin on Amazon. If you haven't seen it, check it out, because it's definitely worth watching. And I'm not getting paid to say that or anything. I just like it. But anyways, in the show, they find Josh Brolin, his character, finds a weird black hole in the ground on his ranch. And the people who fall through the hole land in this parallel universe. And so the people on the other side of the hole, they're more advanced, so they found a way to set up an alarm to like alert them when things are coming through the portal. And so every time someone drops in, there's like a bunch of onlookers from the parallel universe, like watching the people that dropped in. And so I imagine it would be the same thing with the people dumping shit in Mel's hole, Like, here's this advanced civilization gathering together every time an object drops out of the sky, and they're like, well, what do we have this time? And it's a dead dog or a cow or a busted up refrigerator. And I was thinking, like, I bet you, like, because there was a Mel stated that there was a hunter that dumped his dead dog into the hole. And the hunter, like, he swears that his dog came back to life. So the hunter came back a couple of days later. He's hunting in the woods, and he sees a dog with the exact same collar, with the exact same, bone sign with his nameplate on there. And, he just swears that was his dog. And so I got to thinking, like, maybe the people in the parallel universe, they're fed up with them dropping dead crap in their land. So to mess with them, they took the collar from his dog, put it on another live dog, and sent it back up, Like, take that, you littering bastards. So continuing on with the show, Mel not being allowed to see the hole anymore, he starts to talk with his neighbors about it, so he can't go and look at it. So he goes, I'm going to go and talk to my neighbors. And now I'm pretty sure, like, all the neighbors were aware of the situation too, being that they were dumping their crap over there, and, now they lost their garbage dump. And so Mel asked one of his oldest neighbors, I guess, who had been living in the area the longest. He asked him about the hole, and the neighbor tells Mel that, yeah, it's always been there since I've been there, and since my father's been here. And so that was like over 100 years. And he tells him that we've always been dumping trash there, but he did mention that there was one thing that changed about the hole. And so the neighbor tells Mel that at one point the hole had stone columns around it. And so Mel's like, like columns, you say? Well, can you draw me a sketch of what they look like? And the man's like, sure, give me a pen and a paper. So he sketches them out. And when Mel sees the drawing, like, he immediately knows what he's looking at. And but maybe the guy doesn't. So Mel grabs his computer, and he pulls up a picture of Stonehenge, and he shows it to the picture to the neighbor. And to Mel's surprise, like, the man, like, gets excited. He's like, yeah, that's it. That's exactly what it looked like. I mean, this does nothing for Mel but add, more mystery to this damn thing. And at the end of this show, they leave off. Art's kind of kidding around with them. They leave off talking about ways to, like, monetize the thing. And Art suggests that Mel lease it out to the city, because that would pretty much solve everybody's landfill issues. And so Mel kind of laughs it off, and he's like, yeah, maybe I'll do that. Anyways, well, they conclude the show. And Art wouldn't hear from Mel again until April 24th of 2000, 3 years later. But when he does join him on the show, he has a huge story to tell him. I mean, the conversation begins with Art asking Mel to recap the case details, to kind of catch up to new listeners. And then they'll dive into the new stuff. Now, at this point, I think this is like more of a kind of a tactical thing for Art. I mean, I'm sure he's looking for changes or discrepancies from the original story Mel tells. He's basically trying to make sure that he can repeat it the way he originally told it. And Mel tells it the exact same way he did twice before. And this is one of the reasons why Art believes the guy. And so once they get everyone up to date, Mel starts dropping new bombshells. So when the last phone conversation ended 3 years ago, Art suggested that Mel lease the property out to the government to make some money. Well, it turns out that that's exactly what Mel ended up doing. To Art's surprise, Mel says the day after the conversation, he was notified by his realtor that somebody wanted to talk to him and make a generous offer on his land. And who was this new suitor? Well, it was the U.S. government, of course, and who else, right? And so he don't want to sell it, but they make some kind of arrangement. But just as a reminder, this was all supposed to be about a plane crash. All right, so let's not forget that. It must have been some crash over there. And so Mel even states that it may have been like some kind of like secret technology, military, some kind of secret plane, whatever they were testing, and maybe it didn't work out so well and it crashed, and that was the reason. that they were being so secretive. So, anyways, Mel states that the feds offered him a deal that he couldn't refuse. That they offered him either $250,000 a month or $3 million a year, whichever he liked. That's what they would give him, but on two conditions. One, he had to sign a non-disclosure about the supposed crash, and about the money, and about who was leasing the land from him. No duh, right? So don't, just keep your mouth shut, basically. And two, he had to leave immediately. Like, leave the land, leave Washington, leave everything. This seems unbelievable, right? But Mel swears every single word, and he tells the story in his regular, relaxed, toned voice. He never sounds like he's thinking about something rehearsed. It just sounds all so natural. And so, continuing with the story, he says he takes the money, and so he takes the $250,000 a month. And that same day, he's taken to the airport. He's set up with a first-class flight to Perth, Australia. And he says that he's allowed to take his dogs, and he's allowed to take some of the plants that he had been working with, which is a big deal to him, because those are the plants he'd been working with on his land. And these plants, they were special plants, not the special plants that make you feel kind of funny. These plants, he said, were growing around where the hole was. And he said these plants had some very special attributes, like healing attributes. He had been working closely with Native Americans, and the natives told him that these plants were used hundreds of years ago to cure people that were sick with the influenza pandemic that happened, all those years ago. And so now Mel even states that the United States informed Australia that Mel was on his way over there. They set everything up for him, and they also told Australia that he's bringing some plants with him that may be of use to you. And so while Mel's in Australia, he even starts working in the botany department with the ministers of health. And he claims that they use these plants to actually cure some men of AIDS. And that he also set up a nonprofit for the preservation of the wombat, which was supposed close to extinction at that point. And he claims that through his work, he was able to kind of, make them thrive again over there. And so, Mel was living the life there. I mean, he says he had a shop. He was working on stuff that he was passionate about. He had employees that helped him in his mission. I mean, he had it going on. And so why come back to the U.S.? I don't know. Mel, he just couldn't stay away. And Art asked him the same question, like, why come back? Mel states he came back to tie up some loose ends. He says he came back to help his nephew move. But what I think, I think Mel, he knew something spectacular was there in Ellensburg, something extraordinary. And no matter how hard he tried, he just couldn't stay away, So Mel returns, and he returns not to a warm welcome. He and Art start talking, on it. They start talking to each other on the show, and Art brings up the time where Mel was set up to be a guest, and Art little quick sidebar here. Art did confirm that he talked with Mel while Mel was in Australia. So they wrote letters back and forth together. He talked to him on the phone over together. So Art knew exactly what town he was in. So it was confirmed that Mel was in Australia. And so, all right, back to the story. They start talking, and Art brings up a time where Mel was supposed to be on the show, and he ends up being a no-show. And so he's like, what happened with that, Mel? So The reason Mel gives for missing the date, it just blows Art away. So Mel states the day before the scheduled show, he was helping his nephew move from San Francisco to Olympia, Washington, and they had just finished up the final load, and Mel had brought the U-Haul back to San Fran and was boarding a bus to head back to Washington State. Now, somewhere along the trip, an altercation happens on the bus, and the transit authority gets called to come investigate what happened. So it's not reported what the incident was, but Mel was not involved with it. Okay, so it wasn't him that started the trouble or anything like that. However, the transit police are requiring everyone to give their statement, and they come to Mel, and he's like, I'm sorry, I can't. The bus is about to leave, and I can't afford to miss it. I need to be somewhere at a certain time. And so the transit police say, like, no, you need to give your statement, and when you're done, if you miss your bus, we'll give you a ride the rest of the way. All right? And so Mel's like, yeah, sure, that sounds good. And so according to Mel, that's the last thing that he remembers. Okay? And he doesn't remember anything or even wake up until 12 days later. All right? He says that he wakes up in a San Francisco alley, and he says that he's covered in bruises from his torso to his legs, like covered in bruises. He says he's got IV tape on his arms. He's got stick marks on his arms to where, he obviously had some kind of needle or IV in there. And here's the tripped out part. He says that his back teeth had been removed, like his molars were taken out. And he has no recollection of what happened or how he even got there. Now, it was at this point, people started fearing that he was dead. In fact, he would spend the next few years like kind of having to tell people like, no, I'm not dead, I'm alive and I am Mel, because it came up often when people spoke about Mel's whole and the case, when people spoke about his case. For the longest, he says that when people started talking about it, they'd be like, oh yeah, that guy died, and he would have to tell them, no, I'm not dead, I am Mel. And so back to the story. So Mel, he gets himself together somehow, and he calls his nephew, and his nephew's like, what the hell, man? Like, what happened to you? And so Mel fills him in on the details, and it's obvious some nefarious shit is afoot. I mean, not only is Mel beat the hell up, but whenever he checks his account to withdraw some money, he's completely broke. Now, he was getting $250,000 a month, so he should have had something in there. I mean, sure, he had a nonprofit going on and he had some stuff, but $250,000 a month, and it had already been like what, 2 years, 3 years? So, I mean, the dude should have had plenty of money. Anyways, his banking account is cleaned out. And so his nephew is able to get him another bus ticket and get him home. But the trouble wasn't over for Mel yet. At some point he calls home to Australia, I guess, to check on the, what's going on over there. And to his surprise, he tells Art that his nonprofit business that he was running, it had been dissolved. The employees were fired, and everything he owned was sold off. And get this too, like apparently like the deal he had with the U.S. government, that had been in default too. And this is where it gets kind of shady, So Mel claims, this is where he comes clean and says, okay, the property wasn't exactly mine. So Mel claims that when him and his wife got divorced, she got everything else, but she gave him the land because it was useless to her. I mean, not gave it to him, but she's like, all right, I'm gonna. She sold it to him basically, but you're gonna pay me so much money a month. And he said he was giving her like $25,000 a month. So he says that, but he says that part of the lease stipulations was that no alterations to the land were to be made. It was to stay the way that it was supposed to be, natural and untouched. That's what she told him. You can have the land, don't do anything to it. And so I guess she goes at some point to check it out. and see what's going on in the land. Well, it turns out the U.S. government, or whoever the hell was out there doing God knows what, they made quite a bit of alterations. Okay, so she told him basically that they paved the roads, they added septic systems, they got underground fuel lines, they added buildings on the problem. I'm sorry, they added buildings on the property. I mean, all this and remember, we're talking about a plane crash site here, or not, So supposedly she found out about this, and she reneged on the lease, and so God knows what happened to the land after that. So Mel claims on the show that since he woke up in the alley and talked to her that first time, he's been trying to get back in contact with her, and he can't. It's like she disappeared. What it sounds like to me is like she went over there, seen what was going on. Old wifey got wind of what Mel was doing and said, and the money that he was making, and said, nah, I'll take it from here, Mel. Don't worry about it. So she probably told the U.S. government, like, look, this ain't even his property. This is my property. And now he's in default, so now you deal with me. And that's the reason why he can't get in contact with her anymore, because, whoever this entity was that was renting the land probably said, okay, well, we'll make you the exact same deal. We're going to pay you an insane amount of money, and you're going to beat it the fuck out of here. And that's probably what she did. And so Mel was definitely down on his luck. And he mentioned to Art that he was like, at this point, he was selling plasma, just to get by and just to eat. And when asked if he thought things that happened to him were because he returned to the United States and because he planned to be on the show, Mel said that he doubted it. Like, he didn't see a connection there. But Art believed without a doubt that it was connected. I mean, and me too. It's just too much of a coincidence. You show up back in town all of a sudden, your whole life is turned upside down. And they probably told him, don't ever come back here. And so to finish off the call, Art basically asked, well, where do you go from here, Mel? And Mel was like, well, now that I'm back and lost everything I had, I want to try to connect the loose ends that were associated with the hole. And so he says that he gave a few artifacts, little things here and there that he found on the land. And some of those things are kind of strange, had some strange attributes like the hole did. And one of them, he says, was to his former landlord in Ellensburg, where at the apartment complex that he was renting. He says that Mel states that he gave the landlord a WW2, I think it was a P38 pistol with the holster that he found by the hole. Like, this was by the hole he found it. And he says that this wasn't an ordinary gun. He claimed that when you shot it, it made no noise. And so Mel states that he tried to find this ex-landlord, but he could only find the landlord's son. And his son told him that his dad basically went crazy over the gun. He was like to the point where he was like completely obsessed with it. His whole life was about that gun. And the kid states that his dad just left one day and disappeared, never to be seen again. Another person Mel wanted to reconnect with was an old neighbor that he gave a few buckets of rocks to. And apparently these were rocks from around the base of the hole. He doesn't say why he wants to reconnect with that guy, but if I had to guess, I would imagine it has something to do with the possibility of trying to carbon date the rocks to get an idea of how old it is. The other person is a Mexican man. He claims used to throw thousands of tires, down the hole a year. Yeah, I believe that, he was looking for these people because he thought that if he can get them all together or get their statement, that they can do some kind of collaboration to prove that, this hole was more than just a simple hole in the ground, that it had some paranormal abilities. So he was still working at trying to, trying to bring this thing to light. I don't know. the next and final time Mel and Art would talk on the air would be December 20th of 2002. So Mel's back again, and they go over the case details, and he recaps everything as perfectly as he always does. If you listen to all 5 of the phone calls, you'll see what I mean. And again, I'll include the link for those. But again, it's not like somebody trying to recall something they made up. Just the way that he talks, it's very, very direct and very, very clear about what he's speaking about. And so after they go over the basics, Mel starts to tell what he's been up to since the last show, and he has another wild one. So he states shortly after the last show, he was invited to Nevada by some indigenous natives called the Basque people. They claim that they know of his work with the plants, and they would like to come to Nevada, like him to come to Nevada, so they can possibly collaborate on work on something with the plants together. And so at first, Mel's kind of like, nah, I don't. He wasn't really into it, really into the whole idea. I mean, Mel was up there in age already. I mean, he had to be nearing 69, maybe 70. And so, but when they bring up that they also know about the hole in Washington up there with Mel, they mention that they have their own. And so Mel goes from, cold, not really wanting to all in instantly. And so Mel flies to Nevada where they all meet, and they take him to the hole, and it's exactly what they said it to be. Only instead of a stone column, theirs had an iron collar, like all the way around it, like 5 feet tall from the hole. 4 feet. Iron collar all the way around it. But and Mel's was stone, remember? So, but it had pretty much the same attributes, okay? It was soundless. Like, you can lean over, holler down it, scream down it, throw a firecracker down it. You ain't gonna hear no noise. And it was not known to have a bottom. They couldn't see anything down there. They shined light, whatever, and the light would just end with darkness. And like Mel's hole, animals, they wouldn't jack around over there, like nothing, not even birds landing on it. The only thing that was different was that theirs, like, it put off like a kind of heat from like that metal collar. And they don't say that it was hot, like if you touch the iron or something like that, burn yourself hot. It was like sitting by a fire, one of the natives told Mel. And so when Art asked Mel about the heat coming from it, he asked if he thought it could possibly be like a vent tube, like from a volcano or something. And I think he asked him that because that was also considered a possibility for Mel's hole in Washington that one of the callers brought up. But Mel says he doesn't think so. I mean, he says that if it were, he imagined there would be some kind of like odor attached to it, like sulfur or something burning. But the hole there in Nevada was odorless. It was an odorless hole. As far as the age, the natives told him that the hole has been there for as long as their ancestors have, and again, that was over hundreds of years. For their people, the natives said that the hole and the location had always had like a spiritual attachment for them, like they can just feel something there, like an energy. And so here they are, Mel's there, they're all there standing around this hole, and they ask Mel, well, what do you want to do? Now, Mel just spent the last 5 years thinking of things he wished that he could have done to gain more clarity back in back in Ellensburg, So immediately he comes up with a bunch of tests he would like to run, and they get to work. The natives are all in with them. They want to try to find out what it is too. And so the first test, he says, is they fill a bucket with ice. And I had to say that I think they chose ice because of the heat from the top and the idea that it could be a volcanic vent tube, that theory. So I think that's the reason why they chose ice. They wanted to see, if it's true heat coming from it. So anyways, they attach the bucket to a string, and they lower it down as much as they can, which ends up being approximately like 1,500 feet. And so they leave the bucket, so they leave a bucket above ground, and that also has ice in it, okay? And they do this to gauge how fast one melts compared to the other. So once the bucket above ground is about halfway melted, they bring the string up and they start checking out the ice that was below ground. And once they lay eyes on it, like, they can immediately see something strange, okay? So the ice that was down there that they brought up, it's not sweating. It hasn't melted at all, in fact. And Mel, he's puzzled. So he's like, what the hell? So he takes the ice out of the bucket, and he realizes that the ice is not even cold to the touch anymore. And not only is it not getting his hands wet, it's not even cold anymore. And ice against the warmth of his hands, like normal ice, it would have started melting, just like ice does. You ever took a cube of ice and held it in your hand, it's gonna melt in seconds. And so Mel can't believe what he's witnessing. So they perform the test again, and this time they put less ice in the bucket that goes down and more ice above ground, just to think that maybe there's some kind of temperature difference. And so they do the test again, and they bring the bucket that was below ground back above ground, and they get the same results. And Mel's like, what the fuck is going on? So he starts wondering if the ice would melt at all, like even if it were exposed to like direct flames. So he's like, give me a torch. And they give him one. So he takes the torch and he touches it to the ice, and he's like, let's see if it's gonna melt. And to everyone's surprise, the block of ice goes up in flames, and it just burns and burns with no melting. It doesn't change shape. It stays the exact same shape it was inside the bucket. Impossible. And so Mel states that block of ice burned the whole time that he was there, which was weeks. And he says that he talked with the people that were there with him months later, and he said that block of ice was still burning a month later. And there's another story. There's more stories that go along with that ice. And, like I said, for time purposes, we can't cover everything. So I'll put some links in there for you to check out. But you're going to want to check that one out yourself, because that's very interesting that happened. The events that happened because of that ice. Anyways, back to that night. One of the natives, one of the Basque natives was like, man, you know what? Forget this. Like, I have to find out what's down there. So he tells them, look, just lower me in. I'm going to check it out. And I'm going to holler up to you, or get a radio or get a bell or something. I'll ring it to let you know that I'm still okay. He's like, somebody's got to go down there. So he's ready. He's ready to risk it all. And so they all talk about the idea, and they weigh the risk, and they conclude that it's just too dangerous. They don't know enough yet. And so they say, well, we don't want to send a person down there. This is kind of fucked up, but let's use an animal first. And so Mel says that they get this sheep, and they're like, all right, we're going to put this sheep down there. So they start walking the sheep to the hole. And like, once the sheep like realizes where it's going, he starts like freaking out. Like, he's digging his face and his feet into the ground. Like, he's kicking, he's biting. I mean, he's fighting with all his sheep strength to not be taken to that hole. Eventually, Mel states that somebody had to knock the poor sheep out, because he just wouldn't. He wouldn't give up, And so, once they do that, they put the sheep in a metal cage. They tie the rope around the cage as tight as they can get it, non-slip stuff, and they put the cage on the edge and lower it over, and they start lowering the cage down with the sheep in it. Now, once the cage gets past the edge of the collar, Mel states that the sheep immediately wakes up and realizes that they got him down in this hole. So he starts thrashing around. His eyes are so wide, and you can tell that his mouth is open, and the sheep is just like screaming in horror. Only there was no sound at all coming from the animal. None at all. It was dead silence. Like Mel states that you could see the mouth open, but there was no sound. And so they lower it down to about 1,500 feet, like they did the ice bucket. And they wait about an hour. And once the hour's up, they bring the sheep up. And as they're bringing it up, and they get it to the edge, they can see that that the sheep had died. They don't see any burn marks. They don't see any damage to the cage. Nothing. So they're like, damn. The only way that we're going to be able to see, if any damage happened is we're going to have to look inside the sheep. And so they say, all right, we're going to have to cut it open. So they bring the sheep out. They cut the sheep open, and they notice right away that the poor thing had been cooked from the inside. They also noticed like a tumor-like growth that had attached itself to the sheep's heart. And being this was not known to have been there before, the sheep wasn't sick. It was one of their it was one of their grazing sheep, so it was healthy. They took care of him. It wasn't known to be sick, so they're like that definitely wasn't there. So what did they decide to do? They said, well, we got to dissect that tumor to see what it is. And so they disconnect it. They take the tumor out and they cut it open. Mel states that once they cut it open, they see something moving around inside there. And once they get it completely open, Mel explains it of having the shape like a worm, but the skin like a seal, whatever that means. And so Mel recalls that the worm seal, once free, immediately starts to try to make its way back to the hole. Now, Mel seeing it struggle, he says that he was overcome with like a sense of like great compassion for the creature. Like I don't even think he could explain it, but that's just the best way he tried to. Like he felt overwhelmed, so he goes over there, and he's overcome with compassion, so he don't care. So he picks it up with his bare hands. He places it on the edge of the metal collar, and they back away, and they're watching the creature. And Mel says that the creature, before dropping down into the hole, looked back at everyone, and then looked back at the hole and dropped in. And Mel states that, after the creature disappeared, he said that he kind of like smelled his hands, and he says his hands smelled like ozone. I don't know what that means. Like maybe he was trying to compare it to like space, like maybe if he, like spacey or something like that, whatever that means, I don't know. But this is where Mel's story ends. This is pretty much all the significant details. And like I said, because of time, we had to leave some things out. A few things also that happened with the Basque people after they encountered the creature. And remember, like I was telling you too, there was other things that happened with that ice. And so if you're interested, I'm going to include a link for someone that went into deep detail about the Basque people's encounter. And you'll be able to check it out for yourself. And I recommend that you do. If this story piques your interest, trust me, it's going to be worth the listen. And so Mel, he wraps it up by saying, since his life since discovering the hole, he says it's been extraordinary. And he says that he wishes to continue working on his plants, and he ends the interview with one last extraordinary claim. He says that before he went to Nevada, that he had been feeling really bad, and around that time he was already 70 years old, 70-ish. So he says that he went to the doctor to get tested, and the end result was that he had a terminal esophagus cancer. And so, and then you remember in the interviews too, Mel states that he had always says that if he became terminally ill, that he would go down into those holes to see what was down there. That would be his final deal. Him and Art would always kind of joke about that. Art would ask him, Mel, if you ever had cancer, would you go down the hole? And Mel's like, oh yeah, I would go right down there. And then Mel would kind of even joke back, like, if when I pass away, it's in my will that I want to be dumped down the hole. So they kind of had that thing going on. So I don't know if his idea was to jump down the hole in Nevada. I mean, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Maybe that's why he didn't let that native guy go down there, because maybe he was planning to. Whatever the case was, something changed him after that experience with the creature. He claims that when he went back to Washington, that he went to follow up with this doctor, just curious to how his condition improved or declined. And he states at that visit, the doctor couldn't find any cancer anymore. And he was astounded. The doctor was astounded with the physical improvement that Mel showed. And that was the last time anyone would hear from Mel Waters. And so those are the details of Mel's hole, So for now, let's look at what the local theories were about Mel's claim. And so the biggest suggestion I heard for this case is that, one of the main claims was that it just simply wasn't real. It was a hoax. People claim that Art kind of played along with it to boost his ratings. And they say that because they claim Art never really pushed Mel. They never really... He never really pushed him. Like, put him under, like, some heavy questioning, And because of that, they say Mel was kind of just, he was able to just kind of flow with the whole interview, flow with the story. He was never under any real pressure to answer questions. Me personally, I didn't get that sentiment when listening to the recordings. I felt like Art and the listeners, they asked the questions that I would have asked Mel. Mel just had the answers ready, and when he didn't know or fully understand things about the whole, he just came right out and said, I don't know, instead of trying to make something up. And another reason people claim that the story is fake are because there are no records on Mel Waters. Now, I've searched, while investigating this case, I got on the internet and did some sleuthing, and I personally searched through Washington State court records, diving through land, marriage, divorce files, and like many other people, I'm sure, I couldn't find nothing on Mel Waters. If you ask me, I think that there could have been a reason for that. I mean, it's possible that he used a pseudonym. I mean, maybe he was trying to protect himself, but I don't know. I'll get into that in my theories, but that was one of the main reasons, because nobody could ever find anything on him. And I searched everything. I mean, I was looking at keywords that he uses. I was looking at phrases to try to find some kind of connection to the area. He mentioned that his wife's name was Clara, so I was in the court records looking for Clara Waters. I looked up. He mentioned that she worked at a university, so I was checking nearby universities to try to see if she was on the alumni list. I couldn't find anything. I mean, I found some things that may have matched, so I took pictures of them, and I'll look into them later. But if I find something, I'll let you know. But I couldn't find nothing on him. He's a ghost. Let's see. Another main reason is the reason why people think it's a hoax is because no one besides a native medicine man named Red Elk have been able to locate the hole. To this day, people search and they find things that look like it. They see things that could be it, But in the end, when they send people out there to go check it out, it's nothing. That's just what I've heard. I don't know if they're really going out there and checking. The truth is, there's no way of knowing. There's people that will just say, "No, it was nothing," just because they want it to be nothing. So the only way to know for sure would be to go out there and look for yourself. But anyways, people say that they can't find it, but it's worth noting that Mel did mention. He says that he was almost sure that the government found a way to conceal the hole or cover it up. So that's probably why it can't be found to this day. I don't know why he said that, but he just said he was sure, almost positive, that the government covered that hole up. But he says that the one in Nevada is not covered up. In his last call, he mentioned that one is still there, and I'll get to that in a bit. Another local theory, or reason that the whole, another local theory is that the hole was real, but it just wasn't as deep as Mel said it was, and the amount of trash they dumped into the hole, that may have just been a bit of an embellishment, and I could kind of see that happening. I wouldn't rule it out as an impossibility. I mean, Mel, he obviously listened to Art's show, so that meant that he was keen on the whole, fringe phenomenon deal. So it is possible that it was just a really deep hole, I mean, again, no one besides Red Elk, and I'll include a link on his interview too. No one besides Red Elk ever came on record and said they knew where the hole was. Nobody. That's what kind of gets me. Like, not his neighbors. Mel said that there were all these people around the town, his neighbors, that knew where. Nobody ever came forward. I mean, maybe they're scared. I don't know. They seen what happened to Mel, and they said, hell with that. And so, but anyways, I don't see how that. How does that, why does that describe the military becoming involved? Does that describe the military extending the no-fly zone over what used to be Mel's property? Does that explain that TV news crew that went out there and seen that there was a military presence out there? Does that explain that? I mean, what about the property temporarily being blacked out from satellite view? I mean, what's the explanation for those things? Because all those things were confirmed. So that kind of makes you think that maybe Mel did have something. I don't know. But those are the main theories behind what the locals believed Mel's hole was. And now I'll let you know a little about what I learned while doing the research for this case. And I'll let you know what I think happened, my theory of what Mel's hole was. And I'm just going to say that, the hell with it. I'm going to go all in on this one. I'm going to go ahead and say I believe it. And you don't have to. That's okay. I'm not trying to steer you into believing anything, but I'm going to choose to believe that Mel was telling the truth. For one, the story he recounted over 5 times, spread out over a time span of 5 years, tells me that this stuff actually happened to him. And so I'm going to choose to believe something extraordinary happened in this case. And Mel's case is not the only hole in the world to be shrouded in mystery. Just to name a few, they're actually just to name a few that are actually reported publicly, and actually known publicly. There is one in Nevada called the Devil's Hole, and now they know that it's submerged in water, but they don't know how deep it is, or they don't know where it leads. So that one there was the bottom of it has never been mapped or explored. There's a thing called the Devil's Kettle in Minnesota, and that one there, the bottom hasn't been explored either. Scientists think they have it down. They say, yeah. They ask them, well, because on this one there's supposed to be a waterfall that disappears, and they don't know where it leads to. What scientists, they did their computers and their testing, and when they asked, did you figure out the mystery? The scientists say, yeah, we figured it out. And they say, okay, well, where did the water go? And they said, it goes down. And it's like, oh, down. Why didn't I think about that? And like I said, these are only the few cases that are actually reported on. I mean, look at Mel's life. He was fine before he came out public about the whole. After that, it was a struggle for him, for his remaining years. And who knows what happened to him or his wife, So I think it would be safe to say that whoever has something like this on their land would probably want to keep it quiet, They wouldn't want to come out with it anymore. The U.S. government's going to sweep in. They're known for that. Or anybody just trying to, use it for something screwed up or to try to make profit off of it. They'll find a way to take it from you. It doesn't necessarily have to be the government. I'm not trying to bash them, but it's just, when you got a track record. But one last thing before we wrap it up. Mel mentioned that there was a hole that he believed was still active in Nevada. And this is where the Basque people were at. So he clarified that, so Mel did clarify that it was not the Devil's Hole that he was referring to. That's not the one that he was talking about. He was talking about a different hole. And so during my investigation, I did a bit of sleuthing for hours, actually. And a little thing about myself, I was always excellent at the Where's Waldo books when I was a kid. I mean, my friends practically hated me and refused to look at the book with me because I would always find it. And I won't share any chords or any pictures or anything until I know for sure. But I will say for sure that I believe I found the hole in Nevada that Mel was talking about. And someday soon, I hope to go there and check it out in person. And when I do, I'll let you know. But me and the wife are due for a vacation, so that may be where we go. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it because I sure did. And all right, friends, this is Rick with the Space City X-Files. I thank you for listening, and I will see you on the next episode.